Hi, and welcome to a new episode of the State of the Net podcast. I'm Paolo Valdemarin.
And I'm Euan Semple.
And you want to go back to drive lorries, I read.
Yeah, I still get the odd pang. I mean, the post that Paolo's referring to was this morning about having watched a programme here in the UK called DIY SOS. And it's where people do up houses that people in various forms of trouble need some help, and they invariably involve lorries and trucks and stuff getting in and out of a building site. And I just found myself yearning for that, bizarrely. And as I said in the post, that was amongst the most terrifying things I've ever done in my life. But there's a bit of me misses just the sense of satisfaction of getting in and out without anything going horribly wrong was an achievement. So yeah, I don't know. And I still enjoyed the craft of it, if you like, just being in charge of such a whopping big thing and having to sort of get it right and know what you were doing, It was a nice feeling of competence.
Oh, look, you have all my admiration for... I mean, I've just watched a few videos that you shared at some point of people driving lorries, and that was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen.
Well, that photo that I put on the post, it's... just getting to that building site was challenging. I think it was in Pinner somewhere, and took me up a little lane past some old church stuff that I was desperately trying not to plough the wheels through grass verges. And then I had to do a ridiculous sort of U-turn to get the back end into the position that's in that photograph. And then, as you'll see from it, I'm right next to some scaffolding that, I maybe had a foot, 2 foot at the most. Which, when you're driving something that big, doesn't feel like an awful lot of space,
Yeah, no, there is also this idea of, I remember watching this video, and you're going down a road which is becoming narrower and narrower, and you don't really know if you can get through.
That's right. It's a
and the
horrible
more
feeling.
You go down, the more you got to reverse if you need to get out of it.
Yeah, it's a horrible feeling.
Look, it was horrible watching it. I can't imagine leaving it.
Yeah. So yeah, no. So who knows? Never say never.
But you're not even driving a car now.
Well, no. I mean that. So our car was on one of these types of loan where you're sort of paying off some of it, so you end up at the end of the 3-year contract with the choice of giving the car back and hopefully clearing the rest of the loan, or taking out a new one. And it was quite a lot of money each month for, it was a nice big Honda CR-V. It was black, it had a nice stereo. But I was sort of increasingly aware of the fact that I was hardly using it. This year it's pretty much sat in the front drive, costing me all this money. And, as the girls get older, there's less likelihood of long distance journeys with all 4 of us. Because of where we are, we've got 2 other small cars just so everybody can get somewhere when we need to, sort of thing. So it's not as if we're going to be walking anywhere as a result. But we gave it back. So it was partly a general sort of pulling back from buying stuff. And I know, Paolo, you're going to immediately pick up on the fact that I've just got a HomePod Mini. But, I didn't need a car, and I didn't need a fancy car. So I'm quite enjoying having just given it back.
And I think that anyway, these are probably the last cars that... Well, since I moved to the UK, I've not been driving. I don't think that I ever drove a car in the UK, and I find quite remarkable because I had to swap my Italian driving license with a British one. I just gave them the Italian one. They gave me a British. So now I'm driving around with the British in Italy with a British driving license, and I've never ever tried to drive a car in Britain. But anyway, since I moved to London, I have not been driving because you don't need the car if you're there. And I always found this strange because in my previous life, driving was part of my identity. It's you turn 18, you start driving, it's who you are, it's freedom, is you can go anywhere. And then for years I would just drive to Milano once or twice a week, and that, from where we live is 400 kilometers, right? And I would like go in the morning, I would drive like 900 kilometers in a day to go to a meeting. And suddenly I am not driving anymore. I mean, it's even if in the morning I hear the traffic updates and they mention these places, and so I remember, being stuck in traffic there, and it just doesn't happen anymore.
Well, because it was likewise. I mean, my dad rode motorbikes, and so from even before I was legally meant to be able to, I was riding motorbikes, and then cars, and then the trucks, obviously. So you're right. I mean, it does feel part of my identity, and that was what I was sort of comfortable to give up. I mean, as I say, where we live, we need a car to get to any station. We're too far from stations, and certainly when I go into mountains again, I'll need a car to get me there, because it's just really impractical. I mean, you can do it with trains and taxis, but it's a real hassle to get to some of the remote places that I like to get to. So I'm not kind of giving up cars altogether, but my attitude to them has, over the last few years, changed anyway. And one of the reasons I'm not sorry to see the back of the Honda was its user interface in the car systems. It was terrible. There was this message that came up every time you start the car, warning you to be careful and not pay attention to the system that's telling you not to pay attention to it. And of course, you've seen that message millions of times, but the button that you need to press to get rid of the message to be able to see anything else on the console is tiny. And if you miss it, you press a button that changes the language on the thing. So, the first 5 minutes of every bloody journey, I was at real risk of hitting something because I'm trying to get rid of this stupid message telling me to be careful. So that was, I'll be glad to see the back of that. But over the years, the last few years, the thing that's been most interesting to me about cars is the electronics, is what you can plug into it, and how many USB sockets it's got to charge the kids' phones. And with all the rumours that resurrected again about an Apple car, if I still need to get places, I'll be at the front of that queue.
Well, we bought what I think is the last car that we will buy last summer, and it's a Bradley. I mean, it's a new car, so it's a Ford Puma, and it comes with the support for Apple Car, which is quite interesting because essentially once you plug in your phone, you replace the UI of the screen with the one from your phone, which is pretty good. It's nice. You have access to your apps and navigation, and Siri is nicely integrated in the car. It's a whole new, different experience. I mean, let alone the fact that the car, this doesn't drive itself, but it keeps yourself in the lane. It keeps distance from the car in front of you. It's a ridiculously small 1 liter 3-cylinder.
That's interesting, because we've got a Hyundai i10 that likewise has got CarPlay, but it also likewise is a 1,000cc 3-cylinder engine.
But this one has 155 horsepower.
I've not even looked because it's not worth caring about.
It's a 3-cylinder engine with a small electric motor that helps around,
right.
And it's remarkable. But I'm thinking we still need a car because, like yourself, here in Italy, we live in the countryside, and you need a car to get anywhere. But already, if you live in a city, between Uber and car services, and you don't really need to own a car.
No.
And as soon as truly automated self-driving car will start going around, there are in some cities they're already there. It'll mean that any car, can take you somewhere and then drive away and take somebody else somewhere else. We are going to need probably less than 20% of the cars that are circulating in the moment.
Most of which sit around most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Which is amazing. So I think that these are the last cars that we buy.
And it was just partly picking up on your point about identity, because especially for blokes and especially growing up, it was a thing to have a fast car or a fast motorbike, or to a ridiculous degree, it was some sort of rite of passage bollocks. And maybe just me getting older, maybe the kids are still like that, but that side of it's just beginning to diminish totally now. As I say, it's more about the electronics than it is about what's under the hood or how fast it goes, because you can't go fast most of the time anyway.
Yeah. I actually I realized that when I watched the video after we had bought the car, because of course I had been doing some research about the car. Of course, YouTube was pushing videos of people driving Pumas, and there is a guy in Germany who just gets a car and goes flat out on the autobahn, and I realized, and he was driving exactly the same model I have, and he was going at 220 kilometers per hour, something like that. And I thought, wow, I had never realized that this car was this fast. And then I realized, actually, I never seen a top speed. I mean, do you remember top speed of a car was kind of an important thing that you would always check, because we all knew all the top speed of all the cars. I mean, this is not even a thing. It's not written anywhere. It's not a feature. It's not something
that's interesting.
you
Yes,
talk
you're
about.
Right. I mean, I used to it used to matter on the bikes. I mean, especially going down the Autostrada in Italy, I'd be sitting at 130 miles an hour. Don't know what that is in kilometres. Just all day, pretty much. Then coming back up through Spain with my wife on the bike, we were doing 150. Which was the bike's top speed. What's 150 in kilometres?
Yeah, but it's
too much.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about what I did driving cars, it was quite but I remember borrowing my dad's Alfa. He had a very, very fast car, and driving, like going to Milano and coming back from Milano one night in 2.5 hours or something like that, which is just crazy. And and I was thinking about that, and when my dad had that car, and I was thinking it must have been something like 19 when I did that, which is completely irresponsible. But
well, it's funny, having said I've got over all of this, I have just looked up what 150 is in kilometres, and it's 241.
Yeah, okay.
But what I do remember is that I sort of started to slow down, and thought I'd better just turn around and check that Penny was still there, and that she was okay. And as I turned around, I'm getting really battered on my helmet, and couldn't work out why. And then I looked down, it was because I was still doing 100 miles an hour, but it just felt so slow compared to what I'd been doing, It's crazy.
Moving on from the old farts talking about driving fast car section of our program today,
to another old fart section.
Yeah, well, there is. So, what about your HomePod?
So I put it off.
The one you were not buying because you don't care about buying stuff.
Well, so my excuse is that I had bought with some birthday money last year a stereo pair of what they call them, bookshelf speakers, which were actually really good. They were nice speakers, but for some reason, and I have no idea why, it wasn't overblowing them or anything, but they developed a bit of distortion in the mid-range that was just gradually driving me nuts. And Amazon had a 2-year guarantee on them, so I actually went to go and get them replaced, but they don't stock them anymore, so they had to refund them. And I thought, right, that's it. I'm going to get myself a HomePod Mini.
The gods of speakers were containing you something.
Exactly. Who was I to say no? But yeah, what an amazing little device. And, part of the reason over the years I haven't spent an awful lot of money on speakers is that when I used to work in sound and BBC Radio, we had the best of the best loudspeakers and spent all day listening to them. And any attempts I made to replicate that at home were going to cost me thousands of pounds, So I never did. I just put up with whatever I had. But also because of that training, I know the physics of what it takes to generate sound and big sounds. And I just stand looking at this thing the size of a grapefruit, producing bass that just it shouldn't be doing. it's just amazing the amount of sound and nice sound, nice distinction between the different ranges, and you can turn it right up and it doesn't distort in the slightest, it doesn't get muddy, just incredible clarity. So just as a speaker, we're loving it. But what's interesting is having it in this public space in the house, and with both the girls being into their music and musical theatre and singing and whatever, they're just loving being able to call out to Siri and just get it to play a song that's in their head and they want to sing along to, so it's really, really enjoying it in a way I didn't expect. And of course now I want lots of them.
Have you tried the communication features?
Yeah, you mean like on returning from a walk the other day there, I was near the house, so I said to my watch intercom to the house that I'm, brace yourselves girls, I'm nearly home. Which seemed like a smart idea until I discovered that Penny had in fact been having a snooze in the lounge and was asleep at the time.
I didn't even know if it works with the older, bigger.
I think it does. I think it does. I think it's a software update for that, but I think the latest versions do.
My HomePod is sitting in my flat in London, and a couple of weeks ago, the internet went down. I think they're doing works in the building. I'll need to call somebody because of course I don't need the connectivity while I'm gone, but at the same time, the fact that I cannot call, my thermostat annoys me.
Yeah.
It's actually something I'll need to make a call to somebody.
But yeah, I mean, I now, as I say, I'm tempted to have them in more rooms, and I've been so impressed with the sound that this is how they get you, isn't it? I'm sort of hankering after the bigger one now because I want more. Never happy.
Well, now we know that you're going to buy more.
Yeah.
Just don't pretend. Just don't pretend you're not.
At some point, if the gods line up again and some windfall falls in my direction, then I might do. I'm not gonna go out and do it. But yeah.
So something else I wanted to have a chat about is I've been following politics in the last couple of months.
Well, that was a mistake.
But somehow in a different way, or at least it feels a different way. In January, it was U.S. politics month, and I was pretty much at the same time following the change of administration and listening to Obama's book and watching The West Wing. And
what a potent mix.
I think it was so interesting because essentially you have three fictional White Houses. I mean, fictionals at different degrees, but there are old stories that you hear, and I mean, how much of the truth there is behind Obama telling stories of what happened in his White House, or what we hear of the news and what happened in Trump's is but it was also very interesting how the issues are pretty much the same. I mean, you can hear the administration in the West Wing, which was shot 20 years ago, talking about global warming. Mm-hmm. You can hear Obama talk about global warming. You can hear, the current Biden administration claiming that they're going to make global warming a priority.
It's not going away.
And you don't always realize, for how long we have been talking about the issues, but also
and doing nothing.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly not doing enough.
Yeah.
In the same way as topics of the polarization of the politics, and I was watching these episodes around the elections in the White House, and Republicans and Democrats, and how they are fighting each other, and then you hear Obama's story, and it's kind of, you can actually feel that there is a kind of a notch more extreme, and then you go through Trump's experience, and you clearly there is a couple of notches more extreme. So it was quite interesting to kind of observe these stories unfolding.
And any sense of technology's part in those transitions?
Well, I mean, that's in in West Wing. It's at some point they mention a blogger. I mean, it's
just to be down with the kids.
So yeah, that is pre-social media. Obama tells a story. When Obama tells a story, it was the beginning of social media, but basically he says social media didn't have any significant impact on him being elected the first time. They actually registered the difference between their first time and the second time, which is not covered by his book yet, so I don't know the details of the story. And of course we all know the impact that social media had on the latest administrations. So yeah, you can see that entering the scene, but at the same time I think it's interesting to see how some of the issues that we kind of identify with social media now that were already there in the early noughties without Facebook or Twitter. So,
which has always been my point, that in most respects it amplifies rather than generates things.
It facilitates. I think that it's much easier for more people to find nut jobs than it was before. Not it was not possible, it was just harder. I don't know if you read any of the articles about some of the nice American housewives that stormed the Capitol last month.
No, not in detail. No.
I read one or two interviews, and you hear a story of these kind of regular people that yes, they didn't even always voted Republican in the past, but for the last year they kind of fell into this rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, and basically they were swept away, and most of all, especially for these people, happen on Facebook.
Yeah.
So
I was just reading an article about a guy at Pizzagate, a guy who'd been sort of radicalised and taken seriously ridiculous conspiracy theories about a pizza shop owner in the States and paedophilia and all sorts of nonsense, and how QAnon, it didn't come out of that, but it was certainly accelerated by that. And yeah, it is.
But I think that at Pizzagate time, that was, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
That was still, I think that was happening on, 4chan or one of those.
Yeah, it was still sort of nutters who had to go looking for it.
Yeah,
rather than
exactly. It was
people
still
just being radicalised by
fringe.
being there. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. It's shifted in that sense, and it's worrying. And what's worrying is how people are so ill-prepared for it, how suckered they are by it. But then this has always been the way. This is how Hitler did what Hitler did. He just knew that the mass were easy, were gullible, wanted leadership, and
hold on,
would jump.
I'm the one that usually says that. You're the one say people are smart. In their defense, you have some of the smartest engineers on the planet that have been optimizing algorithms to change your behavior for the last several years, throwing billions of dollars at the problem.
Yeah.
So they build a machine that is very, very good at taking you down rabbit holes and grabbing your attention.
Yeah.
And of course, this is a unexpected consequence of it, but.
And of course, now Zuckerberg is being quoted as saying he wants his people to cause Apple pain in response to Apple's attempts to try and curtail some of that.
Yeah, that doesn't help. And anyway, then I started following news here in Italy, where, as you might have heard, as of tomorrow, we're going to have a new government.
I hadn't, because I don't even know what's happening in my own country, never mind yours, pal.
No, we are going to have a government supported by the broadest coalition ever in history of the Italian Republic.
Wow.
And Mario Draghi, the former head of the European Central Bank, is going to be the prime minister.
How did that come about?
And it's...
How bad have things had to get that Italy would do a coalition government?
Well, we do this every once in a while. I mean, it's not the first time it happens. You know, we had Monti before. We had a couple of others in history. Every time we get to a point of everything is so fucked up that the President of the Republic will just call somebody serious and say, okay, you go figure this out. And of course, the thing is that not only we have the pandemic going on, but we're also going to have a huge pile of money coming from the EU, which we should be using to reboot the Italian economy. And you probably want somebody serious to do that. But again, what I was finding interesting about, reading about politics, to some degree, putting a little bit of space between myself and what I was reading, was on one side how on social media everybody seems to be unhappy about this new government, which probably means that they're doing something right.
I was going to say that's a good sign. Yeah.
And the other thing, I was thinking about how daunting the whole idea of. I mean, can you imagine this guy taking up a job?
You've got to be mad.
Taking up a job at this point in time. I mean, he doesn't have to prove anything. I mean, he has already had a brilliant career. And you're basically put in charge of a country with an amazing level of complexity. You need to figure out the pandemic and vaccination and rebooting the economy and taking it in a whole new direction. I mean, they're putting, technology advancement and a green movement in the center of this. I was just thinking, how hard is that going to be? I mean, every decision
makes driving a lorry into building sites look really easy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every decision, there is no good decision, because pretty much every single decision is going to be criticized in the future, no matter what. I mean, and
have consequences that you can't control. It's not as if
absolutely
things will go wrong, with the best will. Yeah,
and it also made me think about the situation. I mean, politics even in Britain, where it's so easy to criticize, saying, "Oh, you were not prepared. How come you were not prepared for this?" And I watched actually, it was an interview a couple of days ago with Bill Gates, and he was saying, "Well, pandemics, they happen every 100 years. They're just not frequent enough for people to have them on their radar and be concerned about that." He was using as an example earthquakes. I mean, there are earthquakes happen all the time. You have small ones, you have big ones, but they are frequent enough that people are concerned about that. You buy insurance, you prepare, you build to protect yourself. But pandemics, they just don't happen. Yes, of course, he gave a speech 5 years ago he gave a TED talk saying the next thing that will kill 10 million humans is going to be a pandemic of the respiratory tract. I mean, he was very specific about it, but did anybody do anything about it? Of course not, because we all had other priorities and we all wanted money to be spent elsewhere. And if governments would have spent money on preparing for a pandemic, probably we would have been complaining about them. Why are they wasting money there? So there is no right decision. And especially in this situation, everything they decide, there will be somebody at some point in the future saying, "Oh, that was a wrong decision. They should have done something different." And of course, there is no way to prove them right.
I mean, I've always thought it's an untenable job. I used to feel, I think I said to you once, bizarrely protective of Obama, because, it's up to him what he does. But I just kept thinking it must be so impossible to get to sleep at night knowing what's going on. And years and years ago, I worked on a G6, whatever it was in those days, conference, and kind of stood next to Gorbachev. And it was not long before Gorbachev got chucked out in Russia, and it was apparent even then that there were people out to get him. How on earth do you cope with the fact that, I mean, look at Russian politics now. How do you stick your neck up like the opposition leader and his wife are doing? And it has to be down to either they're lunatics or it's down to principles and trying to do the right thing by people, which seems like kind of quaintly old-fashioned.
I have, you know, if thinking about happy moments, can you imagine? Do you remember when the Trump inauguration, and they were there with Obama and the wives, and at some point Obama waved, got on a helicopter and flew away, and then he got on Air Force One, last flight to, I don't remember when they went to California somewhere, and they went to basically went on holiday, and then they probably had dinner, had a drink, went to sleep. And can you imagine the next morning Obama woke up?
I know.
And it was not his problem. Yes, it was
a weight off your shoulder.
Yes, it was Trump, and yes, probably everything was about to go to shit, but it was not his problem. It was not his problem. Can you imagine how good that must have felt?
Off the scale. But as you also said, though, I mean, and this has been true of Blair, for instance, who's been, held to account for Iraq after his tenure. It doesn't go away, does it? The history still beats them up even when they've stopped the job. I mean, yes, it's not, they can't do anything about it. It's not their current problem. But again, it still takes a special kind of person to cope with that constant retrospective blaming that still goes on.
I don't know. I mean, if I think about Italian politicians, probably they don't care. It's. I mean,
but that's what I was kind of saying earlier. If they really didn't care, what were they doing? You'd be mad to do the job if you didn't, even in some weird way, care.
All right, I don't have an answer for this.
You don't care.
Yeah, no, I do. I do, but I don't know enough politicians intimately enough to have an idea of how, dysfunctional psychopaths are they, or are they,
Yeah. One thing I do know, having sort of got in and out of Whitehall a few times and known a few politicians remotely, is just how grindingly boring most of it is. And especially, I've done a fair bit of work with the European Commission, and I know that just the stuff that they get slagged off for is, nobody would seek it out. It's crunching through reports and data and trying to do decision making in difficult. It's a thankless task. You might have megalomaniac aspirations and glamour of unconstrained power, but even Trump didn't get that.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I think that look, I have a couple of friends who were elected in the parliament in Italy, and I mean, I've heard stories of trying to deal with the complexity and how hard it is, and all the level of negotiation that you need to go through to get anything done, and it's quite interesting. And the mechanics of it is incredibly hard and complicated and boring.
Yeah.
I guess that in order to get to the point where you're leader of a party or a political organization, it takes a certain number of other talents that are just crazy. I remember when we were. Do you remember K Collector?
I do indeed.
Our
dear departed
blogging knowledge collection tool. When we built it, there was the campaign in America where Bush ended up being re-elected, and we were in touch with people involved in the primaries of the Democratic Party, and at some point there were negotiations of perhaps one of the Democratic Party candidates to use K Collector, and so we kind of got almost there, but they ended up not using it. But some people we knew actually ended up being involved with the campaigns, And something that I always remember they were telling me is how the moment you get very close to the candidate, you really have super smart people, like those 4 university degree by 16 type of people, and I always
even Trump.
I can't say that. But if you think about Bush, that we were all making fun of, I mean,
how good he looks looking back.
But he had people like Condoleezza Rice, who was the youngest. I mean, it was just these amazing smart people. And I always thought, hearing the story from America, I was wondering, is this the same in Italy? Probably not. I mean, I'm not sure there are that smart people, but I don't know. Maybe there are. Because anybody
I think in the UK there are. I think the civil servants are highly educated, smart people, mostly.
But some might be. But the again, I think that what I've kind of started appreciating probably more is stepping a little bit away from this partisan fight and appreciating the complexity and the fact that whoever is out there trying to do this, it's going to be hard, and it's going to be harder than probably it has ever been, because the level of complexity is we have never experienced a disease that hit the whole planet at this scale, this fast, all at the same time. Well, except for Facebook. So it's unprecedented, and it's interesting, and I think that it's putting a lot of humans on the line.
But it's also exciting. I mean,
absolutely.
Again, not unrelated to politics. That my dad, who's getting more and more right wing, and just it's getting hard to talk to him about some stuff, well, most stuff, who will slag off the NHS on a regular basis, and then when I point out to him that the speed at which they've managed to get the inoculation programme going, the vaccination programme going to scale and all recorded, I mean, that's just incredible. It's massive. I mean, there's very few countries have done it with that degree of success. And yet he still would want to politicise that. And I always remember somebody saying that's the trouble with governments. You start off wanting somebody to look after the roads and make sure that they get maintained, and then the next thing you know, they're telling you what to think. and it is that slippery slope into ideology and polarisation and them and us and right and wrong and all the stuff that we've ended up taking as the norm. But you can just now looks old-fashioned. I mean, both, I've said this before, both capitalism and socialism look increasingly out of date, or at least the form of capitalism that we have currently. And that's what's exciting, because I think there is a real prospect for it to be modified, reinvented, adapted to the current situations, and that will call on maybe different types of people with different types of skills to lead it. I think again we're still in this slightly, it feels old-fashioned, sort of patriarchal, dominant leadership type mentality, which I don't think has been possible for a long time. Never mind now, for one person to be that sufficiently in control or ahead of everybody else or smarter than everybody else. It just doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that what might happen is that there will be soon new generation that will have been vaccinated by, they will be protected by these toxic populist conversations on several channels, and they might be the ones that will elect a new generation of competent and new people who will be able to deal with this new level of complexity that we have to deal with, or at least I hope so, because the alternative doesn't look pretty good.
No, and I'm always aware we might be going through a longer rough patch than some of us think, but I do think that's the amazing thing about human nature, is it does adapt and begins to sort its own problems, hopefully not too late.
Yeah, I think that. Do you remember our friend Luca De Biase gave a speech at one of our conferences a few years ago, and he was using as an example the ecology movement. I think it was
remember, yes.
He was
and the way the movement built and how you built the narrative or whatever.
Yeah, but he was talking about recycling and how, after all, quickly recycling became a habit. And it's become something that, nowadays, every time you have any piece of rubbish, you are immediately thinking, oh, this is plastic, this goes here, this goes there. We have all been educated to a behavior which only 10 years ago was completely new, and were people resisting, say, oh, we're never going, they're imposing on us, we're never going to do that.
Yeah.
But now it has become mainstream. So I think that probably in the same way, we actually can change behavior, and we can change behavior, tens of years, still, but relatively fast. So who knows? I think on this hopeful note,
that's as good a note as any to end on, I reckon, Paolo.
Yeah, we're not going to get any better than this. So thank you everyone for listening.
See you next time.